Jonathan, we've been watching what's happening in the crypto world over the last few months. It's been a while since we've done one of these Crypto Convo episodes, but you and I have been talking. We're so deep in this crypto winter, and despite everything that's happening, Congress and regulators are only getting kind of more active. So we figured we got to get back in the room and have a bit of a conversation here. I thought this was a fantastic conversation with Nicole. What did you think?
It was great. It was so timely, like you said. And this is our first episode post kind of the crypto meltdown that happened recently. And Nicole is especially well positioned to provide commentary on this. She's the director of FinTech at the Center for Financial Markets at the Milken Institute, one of the most connected think tanks in the world. She has a long background in the financial services space, and she does a great job of, we kind of go through what the implications are in terms of, regulation and legislation, and she does just a great job of putting everything in perspective from a macroeconomic standpoint with the headwinds that we face with inflation and economic growth.
Yeah, we covered a lot in this episode. I think listeners will enjoy it. We get into the causes of the crash and whether and when we'll get out of this, as well as we talked about stable coin legislation that when we were sitting here recording with Nicole, it was happening. Now it's off for a few more weeks, so we'll keep a close eye on it. But for all our listeners, I think you'll love this update from our Crypto Convos series. Here is our episode with Nicole Valentine from Milken. Hope you enjoy.
From Hamilton Place Strategies in Washington, D.C., this is the HPS Insights podcast.
Welcome to HPS Insights, a podcast analyzing the current events facing the business and political communities, brought to you by Hamilton Place Strategies. I'm your host, Bryan DeAngelis. I'm a partner here at HPS, and today I'm bringing back our Crypto Convos. I'm joined by my colleague and good friend, Jonathan Graffeo, a managing director here at the firm. And we have a very special guest coming to us from Milken. Nicole Valentine is the FinTech Director at the Center for Financial Markets. Nicole, pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you, Bryan and Jonathan, for having me. I just want to say that these are very exciting times. The world is having more conversations about money, currency, technology, and the future of finance than ever before. It's a reminiscent of the wide adoption of the use of the internet and our adoption of engaging with information in a tech format. It has transformed our society, and we're talking about societal transformation. I just want to share that I'm from a generation that has had physical encyclopedias in my home. I had a checkbook, and now we're talking about digital wallets. And this is over a 40-year time span. So I'm really excited to see what tech will do in the next 40 years. And I appreciate being on your show.
It's great to have you. And I noticed you used the past tense on that checkbook reference. I actually still have a checkbook that is rarely used, but I guess maybe I'm one of the few with a digital wallet and an actual good old fashioned wallet and checkbook. But great to have you here. I want to jump right into it because I think we're going to have a fascinating conversation and the clock's going to run out on us before we know it. As I was telling you before the show, we did a whole series of Crypto Convos this winter and into the spring. And it was great timing in the sense that DC was just so excited about this industry. Certainly, there were folks who had been following this for a while, and there were plenty of skeptics, but it was just all the buzz, and everyone wanted to talk about crypto, and everyone was starting to learn about it on the Hill and starting to engage with it. If you're at a firm like ours or think tank like Milken, and we haven't done one in a few weeks, and now we're kind of in another crypto winter, if you will. And I'm curious your sense on where we are and what this meltdown might mean for kind of the landscape we're operating in here.
Yeah, I mean, I came to Milken in March, and so that was a high time in the market still. I went to Miami for the Bitcoin week where there were over 35,000 people there, and Now, in the last few weeks, we're seeing, this broad-based sell-off of digital assets. I would say that, it's a combination of a perfect global economic storm. There's a lot of market volatility based upon, post-pandemic issues, ongoing war in Ukraine, and fears across the globe. We have supply chain issues, we have inflation. And so I think that the market is down for lots of sectors, fintech included and tech included. And, crypto has also just had some very remarkable failures that have made the news. You had, the collapse of Terra USD and Luna tokens. We've had, right. Celsius froze withdrawals, and 3 Hours Hedge Fund is being liquidated. And so those also impact the marketplace, and this, crypto confidence, in the market really is down.
Nicole, I'm curious as to how you see, in light of everything that you just talked about, the macro headwinds, the volatility in crypto markets, all of that, how do you think it plays into, what do you think its impact is on legislative efforts on Capitol Hill? We know the regulators are all still in the process of responding to President Biden's executive order. Curious as to how you factor all these things in and what the path ahead looks like.
Yeah, I'd love to just give you a specific example, just in stable coins directly. I mean, in April, Senator Toomey released a discussion draft of legislation establishing a new regulatory framework for payment stable coins. It included, establishing a new federal license designed specifically for stablecoin issuers. It referenced consumer protection around disclosures regarding reserve assets back in the stablecoin. And, most recently over the weekend, we've had some information come out around the Financial Services Committee Chair Maxine Waters and Ranking Member Patrick McHenry and a high-ranking Treasury official that are, looking to pass some focused stablecoin regulations. So you can see the direct correlation between the Terra Luna collapse and these algorithmic stable coins, and kind of what's backing them to the federal government stepping in and saying, let's figure out what we need to do to regulate to protect consumers.
Let me, I want to jump back to something you said in your opening comments, Nicole, and then I promise we will dive back into policy, because that's where I want to go as well. But I've been saying myself, this reminds me of the late 90s, and I'm curious for both of you. I view the market as down, but not out. This is not the end of crypto to me. This is not the end of DeFi and Web3, and we can go on and on. It really strikes me as we're going to figure out in this particular crypto winter who was real, maybe who wasn't real, and there'll probably be more ups and downs. But do you agree with me on that?
I do. I think you put it in a nutshell nicely when you said down but not out. I think back to when the Biden administration put out the executive order, and I think the entire market, rightfully so, took that as a signal of legitimization, like they're being taken very seriously at the highest levels and here to stay. So it does feel like that. I think you're right. There's a lot of volatility. People are still trying to, frankly, get their arms around what crypto is up here, policymakers included. So I do think it's definitely here to stay with the future in Web3. I think you're probably right, Bryan.
Now, I do think, Jonathan, to your earlier question, and Nicole, nothing wakes up policymakers like a little bit of a crisis or a market downturn. So maybe I should first note we are recording this on Monday, July 25th. And as Nicole noted, by the time we hit publish, we may have a stablecoin bill that's gone through at least the House Financial Services. But it does strike me that a year ago, DC was barely talking about this. There were maybe a couple members of Congress. I'll give credit to Lummis and Sinema and McHenry and others, and Gary Gensler, obviously, with his background and literally taught the course at MIT, understood this stuff. But until the infrastructure bill and the amendment on crypto that caused a lot of the industry to wake up and start engaging, there wasn't a lot of education being done down here. it was a little bit, I've heard it called the Wild West. To me, the Wild West ended with Biden's executive order. If the president of the United States feels he needs to weigh in on crypto and say, let's get some rules in place, this thing's real and not going anywhere, then I think the Wild West is over. Nicole, maybe I can start with you. Where do you think we will see, and how long maybe do you think it'll take for some of these regulations and legislation to move its way through to put some guardrails around the industry?
In terms of, if I had a crystal ball to say when is this going to happen, it's not if, it's when. I mean, there are going to be some guardrails. There are going to be some modernization of existing regulations and laws. And so, I think there's a lot, like you said, there's a lot more attention on what needs to happen for this industry to be innovative, as also have clarity. And I think that, we had an event at Milken in May, and the CEO of Coinbase, Bryan Armstrong, spoke, and he said, 1 in 5 Americans have some exposure to Bitcoin. I mean, that's very important because, that those are constituents, those are people all across the country that are engaged with this asset class. And it's important that our legislators and regulators are taking into account the fact that there will be wider adoption as the asset class moves forward.
Yeah, it's like we all know, we were all around for the financial crisis back in 08 and 09, and that nothing spurs action quite like a crisis, especially when consumers really take a hit. I think that crypto before the crisis was still a little too kind of abstract for a lot of people. People were still trying to kind of wrestle with it, get their arms around it. But then you see the impact on consumers. There was a piece in the Wall Street Journal this weekend that illustrated that very well. Talking about people losing $100,000 because they put money into quote unquote crypto banks, thinking that the regulations and the consumer protections were similar, and of course they weren't. So. Nicole, I know that you focus a ton on the consumer angle of this, and I'm wondering how you think, this impact of this crisis really impacts consumer protections going forward.
Yeah, I think that, in the speculative market, I think there's going to be a lot of attention on education and disclosure and information for consumers. If you're getting into a particular on an exchange, or you are in a particular coin, just what you need to know about that is, in bright line letters instead of in fine print, and in plain English, in ways that people can understand. And so I think that we're going to see a lot more of emphasis on that. And then, at Milken, from a consumer perspective, we are also interested in a lot of the underlying value of crypto and blockchain. So would love to talk to you about, just what we think is also an important conversation around how consumers can win with kind of this digital asset class, and where the other use cases are for it.
Yeah, I would love to jump into that and hear more. You do hear a lot and get a little stuck in Washington about who's got what bill and who's, taking credit for it and where are things moving, or you get the opposite side of, stories of ex-investor lost their shirt, and some of that, I won't get into anyone's own details, but, there was a bit of a craze during COVID, and I'm sure there were a lot of people who didn't make smart investments. As we know, there were a lot of Bitcoin millionaires too, who clearly made some smart investments, but, yeah, please tell us more about what Milken is doing in respect to, and what are you seeing as kind of the benefits for consumers going forward?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I actually lived overseas a few times. I've lived in London, I've lived in Lagos, Nigeria, I've lived in Doha, Qatar for a little while. And, I think about the times that I was there, in terms of being able to move money across the world. Like, I experienced huge fees taken out of money that I brought from one place to the other. And I think what currency as, cryptocurrency as a payment, as a use case, definitely the advantages that I've seen are, 24/7 transactions, instant cross-border payments and settlements, faster, less expensive, eliminating the intermediary, and that's loaded. But yes, eliminating the intermediary, transparency on a distributed ledger technology, and the use case of digital wallets, like assets can be transported, the portability of assets. And I think those are very interesting technology advancements on currency in and of itself. And I think it just behooves us to, one, examine it, analyze it, understand it, and figure out how this can be, these benefits can be more widely utilized across the world.
There is definitely part of the financial services industry, and all three of us know that industry pretty well, that is ripe for innovation and disruption. I mean, you mentioned cross-border payments. We've had a guest on before, and I hope I get their story right, but you could just pack $9,999 into a suitcase and jump on a plane, and it would be easier and cheaper and faster than trying to wire your parents or your cousin or whoever $10,000 across the country, across the globe, excuse me. So you do see what some of these companies are doing with blockchains and moving money in that sense. The different ledgers that have emerged, there's really a lot of ripe innovation there. And, not to mention just the world becoming more and more digital and, all sorts of transactions. We talk a lot about money, but we've had another guest on talking about when you buy your first home and go get title insurance because maybe somebody decades or century ago have owned your house and have a claim to your house. And it sounds insane that someone like me in high school used to go sit in a registry of deeds and look up those records and do that why can't that be pretty instant and traceable on some type of electronic record like a blockchain? But so I do think there's a lot of opportunity here. And I'm curious, so you guys see a lot of the promise. What are you all doing here in DC to kind of focus on some of those issues? I'd love to hear more about some of the events or programs you have coming up.
Thank you. I mean, as you said, we're a think tank. We're a nonprofit, nonpartisan think tank, and our chairman, Mike Milken, likes to say we're a think and do tank. So we are very active on lots of levels. We convene. We bring stakeholders together, policymakers, industry leaders, to have conversations around particular topics that we can move the needle on, whether it's moving through to a policy recommendation or to an innovation conversation. We also have white papers and research that we conduct on these areas. I would say that what we're doing next in this space is we're focusing a lot on Web3. And Web3 is an important area for us. We're focused on the fact that Web3 is the next generation of the internet. And we're going to be releasing a series of papers on a few key topics in the area: decentralized finance, non-fungible tokens, NFTs, decentralized identity, DAOs, which are decentralized autonomous organizations, digital real estate, and decentralized storage. And all of these are very exciting innovation areas for us, and we want to continue to examine and understand them as the internet changes its course from Web 2 to Web 3. So those are some things that are really exciting that we're working on. And as you know, at Milken, we have a great group of experts and economists that we work with, and we have a very active FinTech Advisory Council. And we release a biweekly newsletter called FinTech in Focus, where we talk about these issues on a biweekly basis. So we're very much involved in making sure that we're at the pulse of the cutting edge technology, financial technology innovation that's happening. And we're here to educate, engage, convene, and make sure there's an action-oriented policy agenda that is focused on the end user and making sure the end user benefits from a financial inclusion perspective, from an access to capital perspective, and an economic empowerment perspective. So I spend my time doing that. And, it's just been a privilege to talk to you about that today.
Yeah,
Nicole,
that's
say a little bit more about we've talked about this before. I think it would be really useful for folks, the financial regulation tracker. that you guys have. If you'll just say a little bit more about it, where folks can find it, because it's such a good resource.
So we started a financial regulation tracker, and my team is kind of rebooting it, and we're turning it into a global financial regulation tracker, because we believe that, you know, there's what's happening on Capitol Hill, and there's what's happening around the world, what's happening in Singapore, Australia, you know, Switzerland, and, you know, just across the world. And so we want to also just make sure that we are tracking that information. We started it internally, and we will be releasing some information about the tracker in the coming future. But our FinTech in Focus newsletter will have across, you know, our content information about what's happening around the world, you know, from a regulation perspective.
Okay, last question. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. You mentioned the great work you guys are looking at Web3, NFTs, digital real estate. I won't speak for Jonathan. I'm personally excited about all of that stuff. I imagine that is a monumental task to go educate Congress on any one of those. Never mind all of them. How do you all think about that? How do you get in front of Congress and staffers and get them to engage with you on digital real estate?
So it's quite interestingly enough, you mentioned Congress, you mentioned the staffers. We see the staffers as a great ally in this work, because they can teach us a thing or two. I mean, they're talk about the generations that are already engaging with digital wallets and digital real estate, and making, you know, investments in the space. You know, there's a generation out there that's doing it, and we believe that we're not talking to a stakeholder group that is not in the know. We think that they are in the know. It's just the people that are in the know are in their offices. And so we're just looking to tap into that group and make sure that we're all using what we call the same taxonomy. You know, if we're talking about virtual assets versus digital assets, what's the difference? Are we talking about particular areas of, you know, asset-backed or fiat-backed? The conversations, we need to be having the same definitions on the table while we're talking about moving the needle on writing policy and legislation. So that's something that's very important to us.
Where do you think that kind of unified taxonomy stands right now? You know, do you think are people speaking the same language right now, or is it still a wide gap?
I think there's a gap. I think that there's a gap, and we're trying to fill that gap. I mean, we have on our website, milkeninstitute.org, we have a taxonomy on digital assets that was started before I arrived. And, you know, in reading through it kind of outlines every organization that describes and defines a particular definition. And so you'll find that, you know, you might have, you know, the Financial Stability Board have a different or varied, you know, definition than the SEC. And so we just want to call out, like, this is how you all are discussing it in your papers or in your communication. And let's just make sure that we are all on the same page as to what this means. And I think we're getting there, but I think we have some ways to go in terms of the conversations and the nomenclature around this.
Yeah, long way to go, but it's so important to get that nomenclature, everybody on the same page.
It's true. It's true. Well, I lied a minute ago. Let me ask one last question, but I'm going to throw it at both of you, and then if you hold me to it, I guess I'll share my thoughts. We are a couple months from a midterm election. We are all by nature political people. Where do you think the conversations that are happening right now go if, as predicted, we end up with a Republican Congress working with a Democratic president and his administration? I'll give you two options. Does this stall out for 2 years, or do you think there's real room for Biden and Gensler and others to work with a McHenry and folks on something for this industry?
It's really tough to say. I think in terms of, I come from the Senate, and so I always think beginning and end with the Senate, it's still going to be very closely divided, even if it does flip. And it's so hard to get that floor time for something where there's not critical mass yet, or you just wouldn't do it. You wouldn't use the floor time on it. And I just don't think, I mean, there's a lot of conversation, a lot of things going on, but it doesn't seem like there's critical mass behind any particular bill yet. So even if something were to move in the House, I don't know. I guess it's tough for me to see something going through really closely divided Senate right now, especially as Bryan, we know it very well, that come out of midterms and everybody starts thinking about the presidential election. So the politics, and it really
That's right.
it really never turns, the volume never turns down. So I call me pessimistic, but interested in what Nicole thinks.
I'm just going to say, look, I come from a nonpartisan nonprofit think tank. And so we work with everyone across the aisle, and we're looking to move the needle and work with anyone, any party that is at the table on what's the future of finance, and making sure that we have these, financial inclusion, access to capital elements and equity elements in the space, and regulatory elements in place. And some of these things, we'd like to think are not partisan. Some of these areas should be nonpartisan. They should be, for the stability of our financial markets, for innovation to occur, and for entrepreneurs to be able to go out into the space and have guardrails that they can clearly see so they can move their businesses forward. This is not a Republican thing, a Democrat thing. It should be a people thing. And I think that's, I'm just blessed to be able to work in a space where that's my focus. And I will talk to anyone and work with anyone to make sure that that happens.
What's your take, Bryan?
I'll admit I'm probably a little closer to Nicole, but maybe for some more partisan reasons. I think the innovation is happening. I think it's going to continue to happen, and you're going to see this passing by Congress where they're going to feel the need to catch up. I'm a little more optimistic on the Senate for probably my own bias, having worked up there, but also the work that Lummis and Gillibrand and others have done. I've been struck by how this has not become a partisan issue, with the exception of a few extremes, maybe in both parties. There are folks leading the way in the Democratic Party and in the Republican Party on these issues. So I think Gary Gensler is going to sit in the hot seat for a good 6 to 12 months, but I don't think that's breaking news here. So I'm optimistic in the sense that it'll just keep growing, where they'll have no choice but to put some guardrails around it. But with that, Nicole, this was a wonderful conversation. And maybe on that last point, we'll have to have you back to see which one of us was right or wrong, or where things are 6 to 12 months from now. But thank you so much for joining us on HPS Insights.
Thanks, Nicole.
Thank you so much. This was fun talking about crypto.
It is. It's one of my favorite topics, so I enjoy it. Jonathan, as always, thanks for jumping in with me. And to all our listeners, thank you for tuning in to another episode of HPS Insights. You can learn more about our work at hamiltonplacestrategies.com, but we will also share more on Nicole's work and the great work that she is doing over at Milken in our show notes. Be sure to check that out, and we will be back next week with another episode.
Thank you for listening to the HPS Insights podcast, produced by Hamilton Place Strategies. For the latest updates, follow us on Twitter at HPS Insights, and follow us on the web at hamiltonplacestrategies.com.